Welcome, chosen ones. The second you step outside the version of you they carefully scripted in their minds, their certainty begins to fracture. What follows isn't understanding, it's distortion. Because when reality no longer matches expectation, most people don't pause to reassess, they scramble to explain it away. Assumptions replace observation, and narratives get louder to cover the gap. You're not witnessing clarity breakdown. You're watching people struggle to process something they never prepared themselves to see. They don't react with insight, they react with volume. Because when control quietly slips away, the quickest way people try to stabilize themselves is by speaking, speculating, and circulating half-formed explanations. Conversations spread faster than understanding ever could. Messages get forwarded, opinions get layered, and suddenly your name is moving through rooms you're not even in. But beneath all that activity is a simple truth. None of it is clarity. It's a collective attempt to make sense of something that disrupted their expectations faster than they could process it, which is why the noise grows louder the less they actually comprehend. When something unfolds that doesn't fit any mental template they've built, the mind doesn't calmly analyze, it rushes to repair the discomfort. That internal friction, the strain of holding two conflicting realities at once, demands resolution. And instead of sitting with uncertainty, most Washington people rush to patch the gap with whatever is available. Assumptions, recycled opinions, dramatic retellings, anything that restores a sense of control. But that reaction isn't awareness or depth. It's the mind scrambling to escape confusion, disguising unease as explanation, turning discomfort into a performance that sounds convincing, but is rooted in instability. What you didn't trigger resistance. It erased the coordinates they were using to track you. And that's what unsettles them most. People are equipped to respond to defiance, to categorize disorder, to contain anything that fits within known patterns. But when a move is executed with quiet precision, no emotion to challenge, no motive to dissect, it slips past every framework they rely on. There's nothing to oppose because nothing was presented for conflict. It's not rebellion, it's transcendence. And in that moment, while everyone else is still calculating positions, you've already stepped beyond the game they didn't realize you'd stopped playing. And here's where it turns almost ironic. Not everyone speaking is threatened. Most are just unsettled in a way they can't quite explain. It's that subtle discomfort that shows up in awkward laughter, in the way your name is mentioned with a smile that fades a second too quickly. The energy shifts mid-conversation. Words trail off. Because what they're feeling isn't anger. It's the realization that something just moved outside their understanding, and now they're standing in a moment they don't fully know how to navigate. It's the kind of moment where they shrug and say, "I can't explain it. It just feels off." What they're really admitting is that their internal blueprint no longer applies and there's no quick fix to restore it. So instead of clarity, they circle around the feeling, trying to name it without ever reaching the core. And that's how you become the subject of discussion. Not because you demanded attention, but because you quietly removed the pattern they depended on to make sense of you. Not because you clarified your position, but because you operated beyond the need to. The silence you left behind forced others to fill it, yet none of them could land on something solid. That confusion isn't random. It's the result of encountering a decision rooted in a level of certainty they rarely access. No approval sought, no justification offered, just execution. And once you recognize that this kind of reaction comes from people facing something they can't decode, the need to explain yourself starts to feel unnecessary, almost outdated. Before we step into the first point, take a moment to truly lock in your presence here. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, turn the notification bell on, and leave a like to align yourself with this message. If something here resonates with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs this clarity right now. You didn't come across this by accident. There's a reason you're hearing this at this exact moment. So step into it and own it. Drop 444 in the comments so I can recognize everyone who's truly tapped in. Now, let's move into the first point. Eventually, they stop engaging with who you are in real time and start interacting with a version of you built from repetition. You become predictable in their eyes, a sequence of reactions they feel they can trigger at will. Pressure produces compliance. Silence pulls you back. Distance makes you return. That pattern becomes their comfort zone, their sense of control. And the moment you step outside of it, it doesn't just confuse them. It removes the structure they were relying on to feel secure around you. It was never about truly knowing you. It was about feeling one step ahead of you. They built a sense of confidence around predicting your responses, mistaking repetition for understanding. And the moment you moved differently, that illusion collapsed. The confusion didn't come from what you did. It came from what they lost. Their ability to anticipate you vanished in real time. And suddenly, they were left without the script they had quietly depended on. You stepped outside the version of you they had archived. No hesitation, no cushioning, no effort to make it more acceptable or easier to process. It wasn't just decisive. It was detached from the emotional cues they usually rely on to read you. And that's what unsettled everything. Because when a move carries no familiar signals, there's nothing for them to anticipate. Nothing to decode in advance. The reaction you're seeing isn't about the action itself. It's the friction created when prediction fails and control quietly disappears. People don't amplify things like this just because something went wrong. They do it when their internal shortcuts stop delivering answers. The ease they once had in reading you disappears, and with it, their sense of certainty. All those quiet assumptions they leaned on begin to feel unstable, like ground shifting beneath them. And the version of you they felt confident navigating? It's no longer there to confirm what they believed, leaving them to face a reality they can't quickly simplify or predict anymore. And rather than pause and admit they never saw you clearly to begin with, they rush to rebuild the narrative in a way that puts them back in control. So the interpretations multiply? You're categorized, redefined, dissected from every angle. Not to understand you, but to make you fit again. One moment, you're exaggerated into a story. The next, you're reduced into a label. Then turned into a joke or a quiet fascination. None of it is about accuracy. It's about restoring comfort in a situation where their original understanding no longer holds. Not because clarity increased, but because it slipped further out of reach. When certainty disappears, most people don't tolerate the gap. They rush to fill it with explanations, however incomplete. Meaning becomes a substitute for understanding. And what unsettles them most is that your shift came without warning. No signal, no transition, no gradual lead-up. One moment you fit their expectations, and the next you didn't. That absence of announcement didn't just surprise them. It removed their chance to adjust, leaving them to confront a change they never saw coming. There was no build-up for them to track, no signals to analyze, no gradual shift they could study and make sense of. The transition didn't give them time to adjust. It simply happened. And that's what makes it so unsettling, because it exposes something they'd rather not admit. They weren't actually seeing you with depth, only recognizing patterns on the surface. The moment those patterns disappeared, so did their sense of understanding, leaving them face to face with how little they truly knew. They weren't connected to your depth. They were familiar with your repetition. And the moment those repetitions no longer guided you, their sense of access vanished. That's why the response feels amplified beyond the situation itself. It's not about the shift. It's about losing the coordinates they relied on. You didn't just move differently. You stepped beyond the framework they used to locate you. And now, the noise you hear isn't curiosity. It's an attempt to stabilize themselves in a reality where their reference points no longer exist. Number 2, you moved without consulting the room. No silent vote, no emotional temperature check, no pause to measure how it would land. While most people filter their decisions through imagined reactions, adjusting, softening, reshaping before they even begin, You acted from a place that didn't require permission to exist. And that's what unsettles them. Because when a decision isn't anchored to approval, it can't be influenced, predicted, or redirected. It stands on its own. And to those who are used to navigating through consensus, that kind of independence doesn't just feel unfamiliar. It feels like something they can't control. And that's where the ripple begins. Their reaction isn't really about what you did. It's about what it exposed. It highlighted how much they rely on signals from others to feel grounded. Without those cues, no checking in, no reading faces, no waiting for reassurance, they're left without the feedback loop they depend on. You moved without that safety net, and that absence creates tension for them. Because when someone acts without seeking alignment or comfort from the outside, it removes the mechanism they use to feel in control of the situation. You didn't hesitate or circle back. You moved with a certainty that didn't require reinforcement. The timing was yours, the logic was yours, and the outcome didn't need to be pre-approved to feel valid. That kind of self-contained decision-making isn't common, so to others it doesn't register as confidence. It feels unfamiliar, almost disorienting. Because when someone operates without external anchors, it challenges everything they've relied on to navigate their own choices. People instinctively try to file everything into something familiar, a category that makes it easier to process and control. But your move didn't give them anything to file. It slipped past every label they had ready. And that's when the tension hits. They start reaching for explanations, trying different angles, different narratives, but none of them quite land. Because what you did wasn't built from the same patterns they're used to decoding, so every attempt to define it falls short. They can't trace it back to a simple trigger because there wasn't one they could see. Your decision didn't come from pressure, reaction, or circumstance. It came from something self-directed. And that's what makes it hard for them to box in. Without a visible cause, there's nothing to dissect or predict, so it lingers in their thoughts. They revisit it, reinterpret it, try to anchor it to something familiar, but it keeps slipping through because it wasn't built from anything they can easily access or control. They keep trying to reverse engineer a reason, as if every move must pass through a committee of explanations to be legitimate. But there was nothing to justify. You acted from alignment, not from the need to be understood. And that distinction unsettles people. Because when someone operates from that level of self-trust, it quietly highlights how often others second-guess themselves, delay their choices, or look outward for permission. It's not your confidence that disrupts them. It's the contrast it creates with their own uncertainty. It forces a realization they'd rather avoid. If someone can move with clarity and without permission, then all the hesitation they've normalized isn't required. It's chosen. And that's a difficult truth to sit with, because it turns their habits into questions instead of necessities. So instead of reflecting on that, they look away, redirect, or reinterpret what you did. But your move doesn't stop at the moment. It lingers. It quietly challenges the way they make decisions long after the situation has passed, whether they acknowledge it or not. It unsettles the logic they've been relying on to make sense of everything. Because if someone can move forward without approval, without consensus, and still succeed, then the rules they've been following start to look optional. And that realization doesn't feel empowering to them. It feels destabilizing. What you did wasn't just a decision. It was proof that progress doesn't need permission to exist. And that kind of truth is hard to accept, because it quietly dismantles the belief system they've been depending on to feel secure. Number 3, you stepped out of a character they had already written for you. Long before you realized it, they had placed you into a role that made sense to them, something predictable, something easy to manage within their own narrative. It wasn't about who you truly are. It was about how you fit into their version of events. And once that role is accepted, people stop updating their perception. But the moment you move outside of it, you don't just surprise them, you disrupt the entire storyline they were relying on to make sense of you. You might have been cast as the one who fixes things, absorbs pressure, takes the blame, or quietly accepts outcomes others avoid. Over time, they study your reactions, when you step in, when you step back, where you bend, and they begin weaving those responses into a version of you that serves their narrative. It becomes efficient for them, almost automatic, because once you're reduced to a role, they don't have to question you. They just expect you to play your part again and again. It gave them a sense of structure, a way to anticipate how things would unfold. And the moment you moved beyond that role, that structure unraveled. Not because anything you did was incorrect, but because the framework they depended on no longer applied. Suddenly, their usual responses don't fit, their expectations don't land, and they're left without a clear way to engage. It's not you that's confusing. It's the absence of the version of you they built their certainty around. They can't slot you into the structure they once used to measure and rank everything. And that lack of placement creates friction. Because when something can't be categorized, it can't be controlled or compared. That uncertainty doesn't sit well, so it sparks quick reactions, deflection, overanalysis, sudden conclusions, anything to restore a sense of order. But the more they try to define you, the more it becomes clear that the old framework simply doesn't apply anymore. Stepping out of that role isn't loud. It's almost invisible at first. There's no declaration, no dramatic pivot, no explanation offered to ease the transition. You just stop showing up the same way. The responses they counted on don't arrive. The reactions they anticipated don't happen, and the space you once filled no longer fits you. It's a quiet withdrawal from expectation, where you no longer align yourself with a role that was never truly yours to begin with.